Welcome everybody to day 2 of the Officer Club Clash. I am your host, Christo. I am joined by the wonderful Darkness and our defending world champion, J King. As you may have seen yesterday, we ran through the quarterfinals for you in this new format of the Officer Club Clash. Today we have the semifinals for you. We got 2 big matchups, so let's dive into the brackets and take a look at what we're going to see today. We have got Berto versus Tiger in this first matchup. We're going to have Freddie versus Head a little bit later. Spooz will actually be joining us for that second semi-final. In this new OCC with the new point systems, trying to make it to the Officers Club Championship Ultimate, each of these players finishing in 4th place or better will receive a minimum of 12 points, 15 points for third, 18 points for second, and 25 points to the champion. Tune in tomorrow where we walk through our 3rd place matchup as well as our finals. But before we get there, we got Berto taking on Tiger. Darkness, before we get into the matchup, before we pop open these deck lists, any initial thoughts? We did see Berto compete yesterday. We haven't seen Tiger yet, as Zealing unfortunately had to drop from the event. So any thoughts before we see the lineups around, what to expect here from Berto versus Tiger?
Yesterday we saw a very strong performance of Berto Burrito with 3 aggressive decks, like all of the meta decks. Tiger on the other side, can we just get to the deck list? I'm very excited about this one.
If you are excited for this, Darkness, then let's just dive right in. Why don't we take a look at the player card? Here we have Tiger, who is finishing 5th place last season, a 74.26% win rate, 439 matches. Again, these players are just becoming more and more efficient with their games played. So now, Darkness, it is your turn. Let's bring up the deck list. Go bananas.
Yeah, we see his lineup here, and it's air. Tiger is bringing air. Not only the typical Brit air with Japan ally, air superiority, pin mechanics, and 1 naval supply run. He's also bringing Japan Brit air, where he reversed the alliance, and you see much more Japan units here. You see the Dynal, naval operation against aggro, desperate measures, the newly changed Achi. Of course, there are stronger Japan air units as well, with the Shiden and the Zero, and only a couple of Brit units like the Swordfish, the Albacore. Even some supply shortage and no close air support, because this card benefits more the British units. And with not enough British units, a close air support is not strong enough for Japan Brit air. Very surprising for me was Soviet Brit air. This was for a long time just a meme on ladder or maybe unranked, because it's just not very polished, not very strong. You would think that, but Tiger, it seems like he made it possible with those Soviet little bombers, the Polyakopov, something like that. Yak 7 is very strong, definitely, and Katyusha is another support line unit. Very strong with Patriotic Firestorm, buffing your support line to deal more damage. Very interesting, and like the meme card was for a long time Blood Red Sky, buffing your Soviet air units. Well, I can't wait to see this deck in action. And of course it has the Night Witches, which gives you 3 more bombers, and some late game units like the Naval Brigade and the KV-1 as long with Card War. So Tiger's lineup is 3 times air against Berto's lineup with 3 times aggro, already proven, and deck-wise the top of the meta. This is going to be very interesting.
So let's dive into a little bit of the thought process here. So if you are Berto and your game plan is, I'm going to go in, I'm going to ban Brit Air because that's what everybody does right now. And I look at this lineup and I go, wait, what? What am I doing here? Do you still go and ban the classic sort of Brit Air and figure out, hey, I'll deal with that Soviet list. Maybe it's not, to your point, Darkness, quite as polished, and flipping the allies. Well, I can probably sort that out. Or do you look at that and kind of panic a little bit? Because if you got a bunch of bombers picking off your Jagro little units, you're gonna have a problem here.
I would definitely going to ban Brit Air because it's considerable the strongest deck right now. And I would just take my shot at the other two not meta decks, looking at Japan Air and Soviet Air. But Berto sometimes does special things I not fully understand. But I'm very, very certain he will agree with me here.
Making you cracked a bit of a smile there.
I would actually disagree because I think there's more to this lineup than just it's Brit Air and then the next two best versions of Brit Air. Because I think each deck has its strengths and its weaknesses, which is somewhat unique to it. So the Soviet version has a lot of fighters. It has the ambush fighter, the Yak-3, I believe that's the name. It has the Chaikas, and this makes it much stronger into Brit Air, into air mirrors. Whereas the Japan version's running naval operation, it's running bonsai. It's much more built around dealing with ground units. So I actually think the Japan-Britain air deck is probably better into Berto's Jagro deck and into Berto's US-German midrange. And if I'm Tiger, I'm banning Berto's air deck. So from Berto's perspective, I think Berto should actually ban the Japan-Britain, even though it's not the deck you see on ladder, it's not the deck everyone plays. It's the deck that's sort of better teched into the two decks you are likely going to be having to play. And I mean, you're used to playing Britain, Japan Air. That's the deck you've played against hundreds of times, you've played with hundreds of times. You're just familiar with it. And I think that level of familiarity is going to give you more comfort in that matchup.
Interesting. That aspect of, being comfortable in the matchup comes back around once again. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Let's dive into Berto's lineup quickly. We've seen it before, but for anybody who didn't catch yesterday, let's take a look at what Berto is bringing. J. King, why don't you walk us through this quickly? Pretty standard stuff here from Berto.
Yep. So Berto has his first deck is US-German midrange. This deck is certainly capable of dealing with air with cards like Whirlwind. It has the Blitz tanks with the Greyhounds, the 35Ts. It's strategic bombing. His version runs Stars and Stripes. All of this is going to be pretty good into air. Then he has his Britain-Japan air, which of course just going to be air mirrors. His version, not too much special about it. It's certainly a little lighter than Tiger's Britain-Japan Air. He does not run the Rafts, he does not run the Mosquito, so it's a bit lower to the ground, and that might work in his favor, just because it can get out faster. However, if the game does get slowed down, those bigger fighters are going to really come in clutch for Tiger. And then lastly, he has his Japan-German aggro deck. Everybody's seen it. Everybody loves or hates it. And this into air, I mean, if you go second and they play turn one Swordfish, yes, a lot of your units have 1 health, but your units are very cheap. There is 16 1-cost cards in this deck, and all of them are units. So this deck can just flood the board, and if it can flood wide enough, it can start picking off these planes faster than you can play them and just go face and win. So I think Berto is more than capable of taking down Tiger's lineup, and it's just going to come down to tiny plays in the early turns.
All right, now let's dive into Berto's player card before we finish talking about him and dive into the matchup. Our champion from last season finishing first, a massive 81.43% win rate. Bomb and Raid being his favorite card. We saw him use it pretty strategically yesterday. We'll see if that comes in and is useful once again today. While we're talking about this, let's dive right back into the next matchup then. Why don't we? I mean, we got the bans coming up. I am curious to see if J. King is right on with what gets taken off. Or no, Darkness, looks like you made the right pick here with Brit Air being banned on both sides. J. King, obviously, I imagine you're a little bit surprised by this.
I'm not necessarily surprised. Darkness's line of thinking certainly it has its merits, of course, and it's certainly the go-to. Just ban Brit Air. It's the strongest deck. It's meta for a reason. The other two might look questionably built from Berto's perspective, so just try to exploit those weaknesses. However, I did correctly predict that Tiger was going to ban Berto's Brit and Air, so we will see if Berto does struggle with these ground-based decks into Tiger's Japan Air that has these naval operations, has these bonsais, and we see naval operation in opening hand. However, no one-cost units.
We don't quite have Berto's hand up here, though. I imagine that'll be popping up shortly, taking his time for the mulligan here.
And I'd like to take this time to highlight the card in Tiger's hand, Rule the Skies. We didn't see this in the last Japan Air we saw, and I am a huge fan of this card. A lot of people joke about this card being bad, but I think that's more of a question of Japan Air being bad. But looking at Berto's hand, this is...
2 Red Devils and Combat Engineers. Rules. I agree. I like Rule the Skies. I think it's a very nice card, and Japan Air is just bad, but this card is lovely. But Red Devil turn 2 in the front line, even buffed. That's a huge problem for Tiger here.
And
I do like the aspect of this Dina going specifically for those little bombers and maybe even the Type 94 TK. It's very strategic Dina here.
And if Tiger is able to find an Empire Strikes, he has these 2 bombers just waiting to completely clear the board. However, in the meantime, these 2 Red Devils are going to be pushing a lot of damage. We see Greyhound in hand, we see Hellcat in hand. If Berto can find a Blitzkrieg, this could just be a very, very fast game.
Air superiority is great here, killing 1 Red Devil. Even if Berto chooses to kill the bomber, there's a second one, and well, he has a Greyhound, but the second bomber has smokescreen, so there's no real option for Berto here. And I wonder if this was a mistake. He could have dropped the Sky train instead, the Greyhound. Maybe he got a little bit overexcited and pauses now.
Yeah, I think definitely hitting the Aichi fully intentional because he's trying to set up the Stars and Stripes. But the Greyhound, I think the question is, did he think he had enough credits to do Skytrain and Greyhound? Or was the Greyhound stop and then he considers playing dive bombing on the Aichi, just it can't deal damage, can't attack, and then sets up for the strap bombing on the Stars and Stripes on the following turn. Instead chooses to just hit the Dina. I think this is because he's thinking Tiger might just not play another card. In which case, this Stars and Stripes is not going to do a lot. And also, by attacking with this Greyhound, Tiger is probably thinking, oh, he doesn't have another card. He is having to trade down these units. And Tiger is actually going to fully commit both of these one-cost bombers, it looks like, and go for the naval operation, I would assume.
And he's not even trading. He's going...
Oh, he goes face to trigger Rule the Skies, and then trades off the Dina. And that is an interesting play. He's still going to lose 2 of these bombers to Stars and Stripes if that's what Berto chooses to play. And I would suspect that's what he's going to play because it's going to leave him in a pretty good position afterwards. His other choice would be to go for Whirlwind and maybe a dive bombing, but Stars and Stripes, only way to take out 2 of these units and leaves himself in a pretty solid position.
That Rules the Sky buff play looked very strong. It caught me a little bit off guard. I'm not very familiar with Japan Air, but who is? Now Tiger has limited options. Desperate Measures is able to clear the board with the Swordfish, but Berto has quite some blitz units.
Yeah, it's sort of awkward, and these are really the drawbacks of Japan Air is, yes, it clears the board, but you're now down a credit, so you're another turn away from playing the Lend-Lease. You only dealt 2 damage, so you didn't trigger Rule the Skies. Now the Empire Strikes draw, but after he's played all of his bombers, and the Whirlwind is going to stop this Shiden from being able to do anything for a turn. Do you just play the Sendai?
Maybe Sendai Whirlwind to get rid of this dangerous little tank pinning all of your units.
And that is actually a huge draw for Berto because it's going to take all of these 1 health 30 seconds out of range of naval operation, out of range of Empire strikes. He chooses to just play the Skytrain, which might work out pretty well for him, considering this Skytrain is going to be sticking around for a while.
I think the Skytrain is even better than playing We Can Do It on all of those little units. Because with those pins, they maybe won't die, but if he has too much units in the support line, he's just pinned and blocked out of an entire turn, maybe 2. So going for the Skytrain with constant delivery of small units, this is more valuable in the long run.
And here, Tiger has the choice. He can kill a lot of these units. He can slow the board down, or he can just play Lend-Lease. And with the power of pin in this naval operation, yes, Berto might be able to play a We Can Do It, buff all of these 1 health units to 4 health, but you have to be considering that naval operation, and then, like, if you play Lend-Lease now, and then on the next turn you can do naval operation and set up a couple bombers plus an Empire strikes, that's going to kill these units regardless of their health total. And I think that's a risk you have to take at this point.
I do like the Lend-Lease here a lot. There are two bombers, air superiority. This looks much better now for Tiger. But of course, Berto Burrito is going for the We Can Do It, and onto 6 units. It's so much health, so much stats. And it's looking to get a little dangerous here. But there's a second naval operation, and this will hold Tiger in place for some time.
From Tiger's perspective, he might just play naval operation and Shiden. Because from his view, he can pin the board, essentially the whole board, twice in a row. So if that means Shiden can connect face 4 times with Rule the Skies triggering twice, that's just lethal. If Berto doesn't have dive bombing and a Hellcat, which of course we know he does have, so if Tiger does go for the Shiden play, it will be answered immediately. But from Tiger's perspective, this Shiden play has got to be looking very tempting.
And he goes for it. Dive bombing is such a strong card, removing all of the attack.
He doesn't even need to go for the Hellcat. He can just go for the strategic bombing, so he can still use dive bombing, take out the Shiden, but also get the Whirlwind to the front line.
And the damage. Of course, Berto dealing 2 damage to Tiger. Tiger now is able to pin everything again, blocking the entire front line. What looks quite nice.
And he might play out the bombers as well as going for the naval operation, because he's seen the strategic bombing, he's seen the Stars and Stripes, and if the front line is empty, he knows these can't be attacked otherwise. So if he just pins the board, these bombers are safe. They go through the pin of the Whirlwind, but he chooses to go for Empire Strikes first. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that. I think you could probably wait a turn. I guess he's afraid of a second We Can Do It coming out there, taking all of those units up to 5 health, and then suddenly Empire Strikes doesn't clear anything. So he's just choosing, be safe, take everything out now. He gets the buff on these bombers. However, they are both pinned.
Yeah, I don't really love this play. I would have loved to pin the entire front line, making Berto unable to attack the bombers. Now any blitz unit can attack, and Berto has 2 Hellcats being able to kill both bombers, leaving Tiger again with nothing.
I would like to see Berto actually go face, because right now he has 11 damage in hand, and the Greyhound's going to give the Skytrain an extra attack, so that's 12 damage essentially in hand, which he can all play in the next 2 turns, and Tiger runs 0 healing, and all of his units are pinned. You've seen a naval operation, you've seen an Empire Strikes.
That is possible. Well, there's a second naval operation, and there's Banzai in Tiger's deck list as well.
But Berto doesn't actually need to get... he doesn't necessarily need to attack with any of these units again. If he just attacks with all of these units once, he's dropping Tiger to 1 health. If a single one of these units survives, that's just setting up for lethal, and that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, he's going for it.
There is a little bit of a worry here, though, because if he plays the bombing raid on the Whirlwind, just take that out, he can play the Aichi, and then naval supply run on 3 units, and you're starting to get into a very scary range, because this Rule the Skies can buff all 3 of them. So suddenly you're looking at 12 and then an additional 2 from the Rule the Skies. Tiger is looking at 14 damage next turn. Of course, Berto has the half track. He has additional blitz tanks. There's a couple draws in his deck to just immediately win the game next turn. But if Berto isn't... Oh, and a second half track.
Half track looks really strong.
And I suspect we'll see both half tracks potentially come out here. I'd actually like to see the Greyhound attack with Skytrain face. That way, there is a... You are setting up lethal through a naval operation, whereas this Hellcat isn't so much. Of course, you might just play Hellcat double half track.
He's going for the Hellcat.
And here, naval operation will fully clear the board, and 2 of these bombers can come back down. A 3rd with the Audacity, however, that does risk giving your opponent the ability to play cards.
Naval operation just pins all ground units. So Berto is definitely able to send the Skytrain into the front line, make room for something.
Oh, that is also true. I would like to see the Audacity here.
Yeah, me too.
And it's interesting he hasn't played the Sonya so far. I would expect that he still throws that out. Does take out one of the half tracks with the Audacity.
Half track.
And this...
The 3rd one.
From Tiger's perspective, this is lethal on board with the naval supply run. Of course, we know that with the 3rd half track and the attack from Skytrain and the Greyhound, 2 of these bombers, one of them can be killed, one of them can be returned to hand, and suddenly this naval supply run's looking a lot worse. And this game is coming down to the wire.
It's so close. Yeah, Berto is able to deal 2 damage, probably killing the Sonya. I would expect that. It really looks like a top deck battle now.
Except the problem is Tiger has 1 turn to top deck, since he is looking pretty dead on board. I guess Berto will be 1 off lethal. Once this Aichi attacks, and then Sendai can come out. 0 is actually a very good pickup.
Sendai can take out the Skytrain. 0 can kill the Hellcat, and then he can trade into a half track to clear as much as possible.
If he does go for the Sendai play, it means he can't get down the other Aichi, which is something he might want to do. However, I think you're right. I think he has to go for the Sendai here.
Is he running out of time?
I think this might just be a spectator bug. We will see. So the time is restarted. Yeah, I believe that is just a spectator bug. Tiger, I don't think he's going to run out of time with so few cards in hand. He is spending his time thinking through his turn. There is definitely questions to be asked there about, do you play the Sendai, do you play the Aichi? 35 T draw from Berto. Pretty
Berto
good.
has 5 damage.
And
there is an albacore able to pin something or deliver 1 damage to the house track, killing it. Tiger has enough to clear the board.
yeah,
Even with Naval Brigade, it's not enough to be lethal for Berto.
and Albacore actually sets up lethal with Naval Supply Run from Tiger's perspective. He can fully clear the board and set up lethal on board for himself, which means Berto is essentially going to need to top deck lethal, or this is game. We've seen the stars, we've seen the strat, we've seen all 3 half tracks. Dive bombing, I think, will keep him alive.
Why did Tiger not play Naval Supply Run? To get the draw?
Yeah, I think he might have been just thinking about the draw. A lot of people like to hold back their buffs until the turn they're attacking with them. In that situation, I do think you're right that playing Naval Supply Run first would have been pretty important. And Berto actually chooses not aware that there's the Naval Supply Run in hand, of course, doesn't realize that how close to lethal Tiger was, chooses to take out the Sendai to get the Skytrain back. This will actually keep him alive because the Skytrain blocks the attack of the bombers.
Keep him alive, but for how long? There's a 0 in the front line with ambush,
and
so that's a problem.
I don't think there's a card in Berto's deck which can do it, because he doesn't run 101st Airborne, and the Blitzkrieg top deck, that's just going to be game.
Well, there you have it.
I am shocked that Tiger was able to come back in that game. I really thought Berto was going to win that.
The ability to really slow the game down after that kind of fast and furious start. I think with that continued pace, Berto was definitely going to come out ahead, but Tiger was able to, slow things down, kind of start to establish a board. But I'm still impressed that he managed to kind of finish the game off in that scenario.
And we really saw the power of those naval operations come out in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end, Berto was running out of cards and options, not finding the necessary Shermans to keep on with the pressure. But yeah, those naval operations did a ton of work.
And this hand is looking very good for Berto into this matchup. And I mean, I know it's turn 1, but I would be shocked if Berto does not win this game just looking based on this turn 1. The Polycarpov's been taken out. Tiger does not have a turn 2 play. His turn 3 play is very weak.
No top deck turn 2 either. So Tiger has to skip this one. Berto with some options. Wirbelwind into the front line, looking good. Just buffing the Panzer 35T, of course, is very good, and delivering a lot of pressure onto Tiger, moving the infantry into the front as well. The Yak won't do enough, and supply shortage feels almost like not enough or end too soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to play the supply shortage here. It's going to stop Sherman on either of these 2 units. And it will eventually kill this 4.435G. I mean, the supply shortages I thought were kind of an odd inclusion from Tiger. And I mean, if you're ever going to play it, I think it's in a situation like this, he doesn't have pin in this deck outside of Albacore. So you're not exactly going to be setting up these huge turns where supply shortage is going several turns in a row without any of the units being able to attack.
Well, First Rifles is a very strong card, but the half track is dealing with it immediately, sending it back. So Berto's able to deal more damage. Tiger's down to 4.
And Berto just wins with a half-track draw. He also wins with a blitzkrieg draw. That's 4 cards in his deck, which are just lethal.
Panzer 35T is not a lethal. So Berto now has the option to trade the Panzer 35T into the first rifles. Definitely a good idea since this tank is dead anyway. And Berto is thinning out the deck, very important here, in case he's going for the Sherman draw. Now he won't find any more 32nd infantry regiments.
And unfortunately for Tiger, there's no bombers to buff the amount of damage his Empire Strikes is going to deal if he chooses to go for the Empire Strikes. He might just play down the Naval Brigade with no targets just for another ambush guard on the board to protect yourself from that potential half-crack top deck.
It's instead Empire Strikes, killing quite some units, dealing more damage. With +1 bomber, he's able to clear the entire front line next turn with his second Empire Strikes. Berto has no Sherman, so he's running a little bit low.
And Berto might go for the strategic bombing play here. He might go for the Stars and Stripes play. That would let him take out this guard completely. He's going for the second Whirlwind. Trade off the 2 lower health tanks, get damage in now, and this is going to set up the strategic bombing lethal next turn, and that's just going to be game. Unless Tiger had Great Patriotic War this turn.
He does not, and he has no heal. And nothing to counter the strategic bombing play.
And I think that's just an excellent showcase from Berto, that showing the versatility of this US frontline deck. That yes, you want to play your Shermans, you want to play the We Can Do It's, develop these huge boards, but sometimes you can just go all face. You can really put on the aggression very quickly, and just take your opponent out of the game before they have a chance to really get into it, develop their own board.
And do you think that was something that was highlighted by the fact that Tiger just wasn't able to establish anything? You know, early on was very light on units. Turn 3 had to skip. So, you know, Berto was already pushing a little bit aggressively to start. But at that point, you realize, hey, my opponent might not have the best hand. Now it's time to go all in and just do the damage I can.
Yeah, he had the Polycarpov on turn 1, but that it was immediately removed. Supply shortage on turn 3. Well, not your ideal turn 3. It did take out several units, but then the first rifle's on turn 4. That's arguably the best turn 4 play in the entire game, but it's just answered by a half-track, letting Berto push face for 6.
Yeah, that half-track countering the first rifles was very, very strong for Berto indeed. And Tiger now playing against J aggro, and with Bloody Sickles, with supply shortage, with Empire Strikes, I think he has a little bit of better matchup here.
And suddenly he's looking a lot like a Soviet control deck with these double supply shortage in hand. Berto's hand is quite strong, but I don't think was really planning to see Tiger with every single one of his board clears in hand. Of course, there's another Empire Strikes in the deck, but hitting the double supply shortage this early is quite powerful. And now Berto put into an awkward position. Do you play out one of these types and attack face? Do you play out 2 types? Do you play out the 22nd to get the card draw online?
It's a very weird position. But Tiger is not having a ton of heal, so just attacking is a smart choice, I think. Starting to grind down, holding a little bit the other options for Berto.
Tiger might just go for the Katyusha attack onto the Volkswagen. I mean, it's a 50-50. It's game 3. And going for that 50-50 on turn 3 very early on, very risky.
And he got it!
Wow.
Killing Panzerbefehlswagen, saving the Katyusha from Tiger's perspective, but of course Berto is able to counterplay it, buffing the Type 94 TK +1, and setting up a bomber.
But as we mentioned earlier, Tiger's deck has a lot of fighters. These Aichi is not going to be sort of as powerful into Tiger's current deck as it is into a lot of other decks. It's really just going to be held back by this Chaika, these Yaks. Tiger could even just play a supply shortage here. It's not the greatest supply shortage. I'd lean towards Chaika myself, but he has a lot of options. A lot more options than he had last game.
I would like Chaika as well.
And almost as if he's listening to us, Tiger does end up making the Chaika decision. Berto drawing the bombing raid, meaning this Arado is now a 50-50 between Feigned and Desperate, if he can play that to draw.
Very weird position for Berto here. He's going for the card draw with the 22nd Infantry Regiment and dropping the second type 9040K to get the surprise attacks, being able to kill stuff. But of course, 3 units with 1 HP. Tiger just waited for an opportunity like that to play.
And the Aichi dies on Berto's turn, so this isn't going to give him the second bomber for free. It fully removes the Aichi. Supply shortage is actually a very good tech choice against Aichi. I'm not sure exactly what Tiger had in mind when he decided to run that card, whether it was for these Aichis, whether it was for the Jagro matchup, the US-German matchup. Maybe he just thinks it's good into everything.
It sure is against the Aichi. Not getting the other bomber with smokescreen is crucial for Berto here, I think. Well, Berto does has 2 surprise attacks, being able to clear that big fighter. But Tiger's still having a lot of control. The Empire Strikes plus Albacore, another supply shortage. Sure, Berto is swarming out his units, taking the front line, but Tiger can deal with it. And
very importantly, Berto's Arado blew the desperate measures. He missed Feigned Retreat, which is incredibly unfortunate for him. His hand would be looking very, very different if that other card was a Feigned Retreat right about now.
Yeah.
Once we see this AoE come out, whether it's the supply shortage or the Empire Strikes, Berto is suddenly going to be massively behind and in need of an Arado, in a need of the Feigned Retreat draw naturally.
Swordfish and Empire Strikes will clear even the Arado, enabling Tiger dealing 4 damage plus the board wipe this turn.
Supply shortage does let him play Swordfish and the Yak for the buff on the Yak, though. And that looks like that's what he's going to be going for. And he is thinking about Bombing Raid. He plays the Swordfish on the outside, so if Bombing Raid targets Swordfish, it only kills, it only hits 2 targets, and then he plays the Yak on the other side, which is the best target for Bombing Raid, meaning that if Bombing Raid targets the Yak, it's only going to deal 2 damage to the HQ and keep both other units alive. Very good play from Tiger.
Indeed. Very smart, played around. Well, Berto, however, has Desperate Measures and Bombing Raid, so the calculations are denied because he just played both and killing everything.
And that is a huge draw for Tiger. Another Yak 9. This is just a huge threat because it's essentially one of the biggest cards in his deck. And if Berto is able to find a way to remove it, it's just going to draw Tiger another card.
This Yak was huge for Tiger. And Land Lease on top of that. It's looking so dangerous. Berto Burrito has almost lethal with the key 83.
I think Tiger should actually just play Empire Strikes to remove this key.
Yeah, Empire Strikes and attack into the key to prevent card draw for Berto. I think this is necessary.
Yeah, attack with the Yak first, because you could always draw a Bloody Sickle. It's not a Bloody Sickle, but it's certainly going to be a good card in this matchup.
Definitely a good card. But yeah, I think Tiger has to play Empire Strikes.
Yeah.
Maybe even holding the Albacore, because the pin effect should be more valuable compared to the just bomber.
Yeah, that pause after trading the Yak, I think, It's 100% not contemplating whether or not he's playing Empire Strikes. He's committed to that line by that point. It's the question of, do you play out the Albacore to deal 1 more damage, or do you hold the Albacore back for the deployment effect? And here, I think we're going to see Albacore 39th take the 35T, and Berto's... It's just feigned or bust at this point for Berto. And that is the risk of playing decks like Jagro. Berto is one of the best players in the game, but currently his entire tournament rides on his ability to find essentially 2 cards in his deck. And that's sort of like the benefit of playing these more mid-range, versatile decks with a lot of card draw that Tiger's running is it might be weaker a lot of the time, but it's a lot harder to just completely run out of everything. And as we see Leslie's coming out, Tiger's hand, huge, a lot of options. He's just trying to set up as much as he can.
Akita Regiment won't do a lot. However, there's still hope. There are like 20 or 25 cards left in Berto's deck. And there's a Scheiden. Oh wait, Patriotic Firestorm.
Yeah, he just missed... No, he still has lethal with Patriotic Firestorm and Blood Red Sky. But he also had the Great Patriotic War to drop Berto's health by quite a bit. He does see lethal after the initial attack. A bit of a slip-up, but thankfully he does still have the necessary damage. Either way, it would not have mattered because... Well, I guess that Berto's getting into range where Scheiden top deck is actually lethal. You are right about that, so... unfortunately for Berto, that's not what he drew, and that's going to be game.
J King, you also mentioned, Berto's kind of tournament life hanging on Feigned Retreat. I feel like he has not had the best of luck drawing that card in this tournament so far, where the Arado has a 50% chance and pulls the wrong one. Even keeping it in his opening hand at one point, potentially. We didn't quite catch the mulligan, but wanted to be safe rather than sorry in that case.
Yeah, that's actually a debate that's been raging the last couple of months in the competitive community, and especially between me and Berto. We are firmly on opposite sides of do you cut Bombing Raid from Jagro to make it down to 2 orders to even get more consistency on finding the Feigned? Is losing Bombing Raid worth the increased odds of finding Feigned Retreat in any given game? Personally, I'm firmly on yes, it is worth cutting Bombing Raid. I run 2-order Feigned. That's what I've been doing for the last couple of months. That's what I brought to this tournament. But as we saw, Berto, his favorite card is Bombing Raid. He's bringing the 3 orders, and sometimes that worked out. We saw against No One a couple of times where that Bombing Raid came in clutch. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we see games like this where if that Bombing Raid wasn't in that deck and he drew one of the other orders, that Arado suddenly becomes a guaranteed Feigned Retreat rather than a 50-50. So that is risks. There's strengths and weaknesses of lineup decisions.
I have no doubt we'll see Berto Burrito very soon in another OCC, and I'm curious to see exactly how many orders are in his Jagro list. But before we get there, let's take a look at our bracket as we have our first semifinals here in the books. And coming up in just a few moments, we've got Freddie versus Head to determine our second finalist and who will be playing in the bronze match. Both of those matches you'll be able to see tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. But we will be back in just a second as we get some chairs sorted out for that Freddie and Head game. We just saw Tiger make it to the finals of the first ever Officer Club Clash. Let's see who he's going to be going head to head with. We have got Freddie versus Head. Oh God, the head puns never stop, do they? We got Freddie versus Head coming up next to determine who's going to be facing Tiger in the finals, who's going to be going on to the third place game to face Berto as well. At least 12 points on the line if you make it through to that final 4. So we got some of that going on here. Let's dive in to the player cards to get a better look at who we've got facing each other in this second semi-final. There you have Freddie giving you the thumbs up from Argentina, finishing 19th, taking the qualifier route with a 70.76% win rate. When we dive into the decks, J King, I mean, you've faced Freddie before. Why don't we quickly run through what Freddie's got on the docket here in this matchup?
Sure. Freddie's got quite the different lineup compared to a lot of other players. We see a lot of other players with US mid-range. We've seen a lot of players with Japan, German aggro. Freddie has neither of these. He has his first deck up is self-damage. We haven't seen this in a little while since the nerfs to 34th guards. But this is not the regular Japan main with Scouting Party, or sorry, Japan ally with Scouting Party and 33rd Recon as the card draw. It's instead Italy ally using Mare Nostrums for extra healing, which is going to give you the health to play around with 2 5-year plans as the main card draw engine of the deck. Some interesting cards to call out specifically in this one is the Petliakov, which will be quite good into US midrange and certain control decks that rely heavily on deployment effects. And also Red Banner, which was an innovation in self-damage by Berto. The point being, you play Red Banner on the 34th Guards. 6 credits gives you an 8 credit Soviet unit, which is a 50-50 to get the 272nd Guards, which is arguably one of the best units in the entire game. It's interesting that Freddie has kept Red Banner rather than switching out to Ural Factories like most other self-damage players, since it can no longer give you the 272nd. But the 9-cost Soviet cards, there's the ISU and the 7/7 Guard with Pincer, which I do not know its name because nobody's ever played it before. So, interesting choice. Then we have his Japan deck, which is not Japan aggro, it's Japan-France Resistance. Very powerful deck. We saw it clutch out a win against Jagro in his quarterfinal game. Quite a strong deck, quite frustrating to play against for certain players. I actually like playing the deck. I don't mind playing against the deck. I think it's quite good, and it's very interesting to see a player in his first appearance in a major tournament really bringing decks that he seems more comfortable with himself, decks that he likes to play, I would guess, rather than just the traditional aggro lineup. And then third, of course, we have Britain-Japan Air. We saw this get banned in the quarterfinals, but it's been banned quite a few times. It might be banned again right now. It's Britain-Japan Air. Not a lot special about this list. Pretty meta and pretty powerful.
So, you've got a lineup here where you got that one meta list, the Brit Air list, that gets banned, I don't know, 95% of the time. But now you've got these 2 other lists that are not quite meta and not necessarily easy to play either. Spooz, as you're looking at a player like Freddie coming in, new kind of to the OCC, to the tournament scene a little bit, is that surprising? Or to J King's point, do you think, hey, this is just what I'm comfortable with and I'm going to bring it for better or for worse?
I mean, usually it's you're better just in a better spot when you're bringing decks that you're comfortable with over just bringing what decks are in the meta currently or what are the other players bringing. Usually it's not a good advice even for newer players to do this, because you need a lot of practice to pilot several decks. And if you just net deck them, copy them, play them even the first time in a tournament environment against players that are very familiar with the matchups, you're in a very bad spot. So bring the decks that you're comfortable with and you know the matchups with, and you're in a way better spot than just copying decks, I guess.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially since for the most part, it seems like the majority of players are bringing some variation of medalists. So it's probably, if Freddie's comfortable playing that deck, he's probably played it in a similar matchup before. And speaking of his opponent, why don't we go ahead and take a look at Head's player card here? Not somebody somebody we've seen fairly often in these OCCs, making that cutoff, finishing 6th and guaranteeing their spot with a 77% win rate. I mean, these players have all really shown that they know what they're doing. They win a high percentage of their games, and they come to events like this and just show that they've got the experience. So let's Spooz, let's have you dive into to Head's list and walk us through what they're bringing here today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Head, in the opposite to Freddie, bringing more meta style list here with Jagro, for example, a very well designed list already, very high optimized. And I think he's not bringing too many crazy stuff here. Triple Shinodo over Mido regiments, for example. But overall, this is just a very, very well-known list. And Head with that choice of the first deck. Then we have another meta deck here, Brit Japan Air, with the introduction or with the change of the IGD3A. it just became very popular again. People experimented with US variant or other Japan variants, but with the IG you have more tools to get the Empire Strikes Value later. Also gives you a very strong card with the destruction effect and gives you just another bomber with 3 attack or even more if you just have 2 of those IGs on board later on. So a very strong deck, and we've just seen it in the quarterfinals. A very good target for a ban, because yeah, Brit Air, even after several nerfs, still one of the strongest lists in the game, and that's why Head is bringing it here probably today. And then, yeah, we have kind of an off-meta list. It was very popular at the mid or at the end of last year. We've seen it a lot. Soviet France Control with triple Reamer in it. Reamer just got nerfed recently, now only giving what is the effect? Mobilize to adjacent units, no longer to all of your units, but still valuable card and worth playing in that deck. And then yeah, you just have all these strong Soviet control cards in it, like double Petliakov, you have the Bryansk Irregulars, just the 272nd that J King just mentioned. A very strong list, and yeah, probably a stronger lineup, just looking at how dominant the decks are in the game currently, or in the meta, in the top ladder. Then it looks like Head is maybe having a better shot here, but yeah, we just saw what Freddie did in the quarterfinals to J King, who also brought some very strong decks in general. But yeah, if you just go a little bit off meta, try to counter your opponents, then yeah, you can just surprise.
So, J King, having faced Freddie's lists before, or looking at what Head's bringing, is it still another one of those, hey, let's just ban Brit Air and play with the other two? Or is there something more to it now, having experienced what Freddie's brought to the table?
I'm leaning towards just banning Air again. I mean, I think from Freddie's, from Head's perspective, he doesn't have as many decks that are necessarily incredibly punished by Resistance. Resistance is very good into more of these mid-range decks or anti-aggro control decks, and that's not necessarily what Head has, and the Head's own Soviet France deck is very unit-based, and it might be too many units for Resistance to really deal with. And on the other side, self-damage, I mean, its best matchup is Jagra, which will be on the table if Air is banned, but it's also very good into US mid-range, so it's not as strong. I think you could ban self-damage. I think there's a fine for that, but I would leave Resistance on the table for sure.
Well, we've got the ban, so let's take a look and see if that is exactly the case. And hey, big shocker. We have Brit Air banned on both sides, so we're going to have both players, Japan and Soviet lists. Not exactly mirror matchups here. They actually did bring fairly different lists, so should still be fun because it'll be the same nation, but it definitely will not be the same end goal here as we get going with game one.
Yep, and going into game one, it's Head on Jagra versus Freddie's Soviet Italy self-damage. So this is definitely the matchup Freddie wants and not the matchup Head wants at all. This is heavily favored for self-damage, and probably the Italian ally version of self-damage even more so than the Japan ally, because you do have those Mare Nostrums for extra healing on top of just the power of your tempo cards like Winter Warfare and cards like 456 which grow off of your opponent hitting you in the face, which is what Jaguar wants to do.
So when we saw this matchup, or kind of self-damage versus Jaguar, I think it was you who just kept cards or held cards back the first 3 turns, even with Jaguar. Would it make sense here in Head's spot to just do it again? Or what could be an argument to just hold cards back or play them early on?
I think it has a lot to do with what's in your hand. Double Errata and Key, definitely powerful cards if Head chose to hold things back. On the other hand, decks have gotten slightly more refined. They're running more and more copies of SU. So if you do just hold things back, there is the ability or possibility that you just get blown out on board. I would not have minded Head holding back Bicycle Regiment. I think I likely would have done so in his position. But thankfully for him, Freddie doesn't necessarily have the strongest punish ever for it.
On the other hand, already has a 34s in hand that only costs 3. We might just see that one being deployed. Or is there any other line that makes more sense, like this, for example? Would you have drafted 34s, or was this the better play here?
I would have leaned towards 34th myself, since there's not really any punishes for it. Like, Sendai answers it, but Sendai's always going to answer it, so it's not really a punish if you force Jagro's turn 4 to be Sendai pass. Whereas moving up this 456th, it can get answered by a few more things, like even just an Akita 50-50 or a couple of cavalry regiments. Could just remove this very powerful option you have, and it's not utilizing the Blitz to the best of its abilities. However, with Key being the play here, it is going to stick around. Key is going to draw both players, and now Head's going to have the option to take out this 456 with the Key. But after that point, it's not great options. He can draw with both Eratos if he wants. He can move up an Akita to try to control the front line if he wants. Nothing feels great in this position for him.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Head deciding to draw with the first Eradu, dropping the second very likely. Finds desperate measures, not too bad. And that Key is going to stick for another round, so Freddie kind of forced to play the Winter Warfare into it, probably.
Yeah, this is a very interesting choice for Freddie as to whether he plays the Winter Warfare or the Red Dawn, because the Red Dawn can take out Sendais in the future, which is very powerful. It can take out these Shinhodos. It's better suited at removing Signal Regiment. However, Winter Warfare is really great if Head plays Dina into a bunch of cavalries, or just has a lot of 1-drops in hand, or Feigned Retreat. Winter Warfare, having the AoE in hand, very useful, especially with Jagro clogging up the front line. So both of these are cards you don't really want to have to play, but he really has to play one of them here, and he chooses to go for the Red Dawn.
Yeah, interesting choice, and makes absolutely sense just hearing what you're saying, that the Winter Warfare is just so important against all this small stuff. Like, it's hard for Freddie to reach just 2 or 3 Type 93 stacked in the support line from Head. So Winter Warfare is a pretty good tool to just reach them and remove all of them while Head is in the front line. That's really a good argument to just hold it back here. Take this 3 more damage this turn, but have a very strong tool for later on. And with 2 more Nostrums, I think you can just afford to take a little bit more damage here at this point, with having 2 big units in the front line already. And we might just see 1 more Nostrum next turn. Then he goes up to 18 again, and still having that strong Winter Warfare for later on.
And it looks like Head is trying to set up a Desperate Measures play here. Actually, he's choosing to go for the Akita, leave the Yak on. If he just had a few more credits, you'd be able to deal with this 34th guide, but unfortunately he can't. He now has the choice whether to trade the Erato into the Yak or go face. He's going to go face, and here's where those Marinostrum clutch. Freddie would otherwise be on 7 health, potentially at risk of being burnt out of the game, but Marinostrum on 34th guides heals 7.
So, do you play both Marinostrum here, one on the Yak and one on the 34s, or do you just play one and hold the other one back?
I think you can afford to hold the other one back, because you can also get out a second 34th while you're at it. At this point, it's really Freddie's game to lose, because he has all the healing necessary. He has a lot of burst in his hand. He has the KV to answer a Feigned Retreat. I think there's a lot of possibilities he can go for here, and all of them are just pretty good. I think I would lean towards playing Marinostrum, even just hitting face for 7, and then playing out another 34th and Yak into the Type 93.
This is exactly what we're going to see here. And Head kind of in a problem now. Found the Signal Regiment, but Freddie back to 14 health and only 1 Eradu on board that can reach the HQ from Freddie here. Not the best position to be in.
No, and I think this is likely just going to be game. Head Freddie is able to deal 12 damage from hand if this 34th sticks in the front line, and I mean, Head just doesn't have a way to kill it. He can start damaging it, but not only is Freddie going to heal 7, he also just has lead.
Yeah, with that Ura, it's exactly 15 damage right now. And this is game number 1. Self-damage dominating, Mon Rostrum really making a difference here. There we go. 1-0 for Freddie. Freddie still undefeated in this tournament so far.
Got 3-0, very dominant start. And I mean, what's interesting now is Freddie, Head, and Tiger, who waits the winner of this match in the finals, all 3 of these players have never won an OCC. Head and Tiger have played in plenty of OCCs, but none of these 3 players have ever won an OCC, so we're getting a brand new champion.
Ooh.
This is a clash, but I mean, OCC clash, winning it is certainly nothing to slouch at. This is still a very, very difficult tournament to win, and we're getting a new winner. And here, we're going to have the Jagro mirror. Oh, sorry, not the Jagro mirror, the Resistance versus Jagro.
It is Japan versus Japan, but the decks could not be more different. Like a very aggressive deck and a very, very control-heavy deck. And Freddie with a very good starting hand here. Also found another naval support here. Is it even naval support?
Naval Operation.
Naval Operation. We have too many naval cards in the game.
But on the other side of the board, Head's hand is also looking quite good. He has Key, and I mean, Freddie's won this matchup once before, but an important part of that was having a defend in depth to answer the turn 4 Key. And at the moment, that's not in hand. He has 2 Tauras and 2 naval operations, so this is going to be able to answer the swarms of ground units that Jagro is able to put out. But so far, it looks like this Key might stick around.
Yeah, definitely. A very important part that you mentioned there. And also, even if Freddie would have the defend and deaths here with Key played next turn, Head only has 4 cards in his hand, and the defend and death would only deal 4 damage. So even if he finds it, it's very hard to deal with that Key next turn.
However, Head there's a good possibility Head is going to play the Dina here. I mean, if you played it on curve, it looks good. You don't want to play the 35T to not attack face. However, this does mean that Head will have 5 cards in hand, actually 6 cards in hand, when he plays the Key next turn. If he plays the Key next turn.
That's very likely, yeah.
However, Freddie still does not have a defend in depth in hand.
So Freddie's hand kind of awkward here. Naval Operation, only killing the 35T. Goes for the Honorable Death instead.
I actually think that that's it's not a play you are happy to make as Freddie, but I think it's a play that you're sort of forced to valuing these AoEs over the power of this Honorable Death. And at this point, Jagro has so many cards in hand. It's not going to matter if you give them 1 extra card draw right now. They're going to be able to play it on curve anything they want next turn. And Head, obviously Head does not know what's in Freddie's hand, so it makes the correct play from his perspective, which is to flood the board. You were able to flood the board multiple times, even if there is an AoE board clear, and Key could just immediately be hit by the defend in depth.
So was there an argument to maybe kill the Diner with the Honorable Death? Should you get 1 more damage from the Panther 35T? But on the other hand, you get rid of that Diner that is not really targetable from these naval operations.
For sure, that's definitely a possibility. I suppose from Freddie's perspective is the Dyna has 1 operation cost, so 1 credit to deal 1 damage is not the most efficient for Jagro, especially Jagro with a huge hand. And this bombing raid sitting in hand can always target the HQ to pick off the Dina after a Tora, or in this case, it's looking like bombing raid's just a pretty good option to take out the front line. He is going to go for the naval operation take initiative. Small mistake drawing last, but that probably would not have changed his play too much, picking up the Siren.
Head finds the desperate measures, so he's able to bring Freddie down to 5 this turn.
And
holding it back, so he has 5 more damage in hand. All he needs is 2 more damage on Freddy's HQ. And if Freddy's not able to find any healing, this could be game.
playing straight into bombing raid with those units. Quite unfortunate, and his head is just trying to get as many cards out of his hand, likely trying to set up a key on the following turn. And again, correctly choosing to hold key back here, because now he would be punished by the defendant depth if he chose to go for that. However, maybe overcommitting onto the board slightly too much. We'll see.
Freddy has the bombing raid and Siren Tora combo in hand, getting rid of all units but the Dyna. Had 1 damage off, lethal here.
And he might just do key, attack the HQ. Yeah, I mean, again, slightly incorrect position for bombing raid. The Blade of the Samurai top deck is huge, but if Freddy plays that, he's just dead. He needs to play defend in depth and bombing raid to take out both of these units. But that is a very difficult position to read from his perspective.
Yeah, head down to 3 cards. But we know that one of them is bombing raid, which gives head lethal here with the additional attack from the Dyna. And Freddy is not seeing it.
And he goes for the blade, and this Dina, which got played on turn 3, and Freddy chose not to kill with the honorable death, comes back and bites him because this Dina did way more than 2 damage that the 35T would have dealt for the 1 turn it lived had he honorable death the Dina instead. And that mistake, I mean, it's incredibly small decision very early on into the game ends up being the difference. Head tying it up, and now has his Soviet France into resistance, which is likely a much more comfortable matchup from his perspective because he has a lot more units. He's able to play a slower game. He's able to heal out of some of the burn the resistance deck is able to put out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this went. Like you said, there are a lot of, like with Jag, we have a lot of targets that are very weak to this AoE from Naval Operation and Tora. But with Head's deck here, there are way more units that have a lot of HP, are very resistant against all these AoE orders. And I'm excited to see how Freddy approaches this matchup and how Head just tries to bring so much value on board that Freddy is not able to deal with it.
I think from Freddy's perspective, his game plan needs to be limiting the amount of head off so that Freddy is able to do the necessary burn to just end this game, because he cannot go to fatigue. He cannot destroy all of Head's units. There's just too many units in Head's deck. So he needs to be more proactive in this game. He can't just sit back and slowly trade things out. He needs to be able to try to put on the pressure, and that is not the hand you want to see if that's your game plan.
Ooh. Not really. The only good thing is the defend and dash. The rest is kind of useless against Head. But we'll see. Freddy already in top deck mode here, but he has a lot of good cards that can give him additional draw or just provide him way more value than those cards are providing at the moment.
And the majority of Head's units are ground units, so despite these naval operations not being the most powerful cards ever in this matchup, they're not going to be wiping boards. They are going to be slowing Head down, and that's going to be buying Freddy extra turns to draw into the rest of his deck. And the rest of his deck is quite powerful. He has cards like Phony War to just draw a large number of cards, or he just has Vive la Resistance, Take Initiative, cards that will cycle, get him deeper in finding these burn cards, these burst cards.
Yeah, on the other hand, Head is just like beating Freddy with his own weapons here. He also has triple call to colonies. He has those 845th that potentially can just provide a lot of HQ health. So it could be hard for Freddy to just burn Head down with kamikazes and all this AoE that also hits HQ. So I think Head, just matchup-wise, has the advantage here, right? We just agree on that one.
Yeah, and Head with both 845th and Engineers Battalion, that is all of his unit-based healing, and he also runs Call to the Colonies, finding another one. Head is just hitting all of his healing, which might not seem too significant now, but in 10, 20, 25 turns when Freddie's almost out of cards and he's played Kika, he's played Last Rites, that health, that healing now is going to come in very, very clutch for Head.
And I also forgot the 329s, which is an additional source of healing here. So Freddie not in the best spot in the world. And additionally to that, Head also has a lot of guards in the deck. So Kicker, for example, cannot directly blitz to the face, which is another source of damage that cannot be provided to Head's HQ. So all the aces in Head's hand here right now, and Freddie really needs to top deck something that he can actually just apply some pressure with. But this hard hand is definitely not the way he's going to do that.
Yeah, here he can do Imperial Decree Tora to just kill these two 845ths. Naval Operation will stop any damage, and throws out the Tora. At this point, he is really looking for a Phony War deck if you're burning that many cards. Not necessarily to play immediately on turn 6, but he is very much looking to draw a Phony War in the next 2 to 3 turns. And Head just, I mean, playing out the Engineers, 2 Bryansk, he's going to be healing for every time one of these units dies, and he's under absolutely no pressure from any of Freddie's units.
Freddie finding the key 83 on top, but Head just having a defend and death in hand, instantly removing it, and starts to deliver damage to Freddie's HQ now. Freddie finds the Call to the Colonies. And he's always going for the draw here, right? He has
to. I think you need to go for the draw here. It's not great. This deck does not run as much healing as it used to. So it doesn't feel amazing to use a card like Call to the Colonies to draw when you have so much other draw in your deck. You have Thieves, you have Take Initiatives, you have Phony Wars. But in this situation, none of those cards are in your hand. I think you have to go for the draw.
Yeah, completely agree. And what he's mostly looking forward is to find a Phony War, not finding it here.
He can use the Honorable Death to take out the Engineers to make sure it doesn't actually heal anything. But again, his other options aren't great. You're only taking 2 damage. You're not under a ton of pressure. However, if he does play this Honorable Death, it means there will be no Honorable Deaths for the KV that is currently sitting in Head's hand.
Oh yeah, that's another very problematic card for Freddie there. Like, sure, he has the Call to the Colonies. So do you think Head is holding the KV1 back until he's having less than 6 cards in hand, just because it's such a strong card in that matchup?
I mean, from Head's perspective here, I think you either play the KV or you play the T60. And the benefit of the T60 is it is meaning you're going to be having larger hands going into the future. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of playing out this Bryansk, because if Freddie just plays a Bonsai here, suddenly you're out of guards. And
oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's not necessarily a big reason right now, especially with 2 Honorable Deaths gone, to have double Bryansk in the support line at this given moment in time. And I mean, maybe he's just trying to empty his hand, so Phony always threatens to draw him more cards, but this is also a matchup that could go to fatigue if Head mills enough important cards, so you also don't want to be drawing too much.
So for Head, this absolutely reads like a Phony War in Freddie's hand here. So if I would be Head, I would be thinking he's just emptying in his hand to play Phony War next turn. But also Head stuck with a really awkward hand here. Just able to drop the Rima. He's just not really protecting against the Siren.
Yeah, Rima is an odd choice to me there, because this 39th Rifles is never going to take in Freddie's deck. He just does not run any cards in his deck that could be taken by 39th Rifles. And turn 8's not really an amazing turn for any of Freddie's blitz plans. Like, the only thing that could even attack would be Shiden, and you immediately respond to that with a T-34, only taking 4 damage. So I don't necessarily see the point of playing this guard now. I think Head is a little bit too scared and maybe focusing on the wrong aspects of this game right now. Freddie, though, has to make a pretty difficult choice. He has 2 ways to kill this Rima, or he could just ignore the Rima. He's going to kill it with the Blade of the Samurai, though.
That is interesting, although he could have also killed with a call to the colonies. So what could be an argument to use Blade of Samurai? Okay, call to colonies is cheaper, so you can...
Or defend in depth.
Why am I always mixing these up today? So, yeah, defend and death is cheaper, so you can combine it with another order later. So maybe that was the argument to play the Blade of Samurai here.
Head not using T-34 to kill the Siren, if that is what he goes for in the end, that would confuse me quite a bit. He is fully reading a
phony war.
War here, and emptying his hand, while making it so that he draws more cards off phony war. It also means that this defend in depth will not be enough on its own to kill KV. Defend in depth plus Tora or defend in depth plus naval operations can take it out, but that again just leaves Freddie with no cards in hand. Virtually.
Here comes defend in depth, Tora, killing KV1. Yeah, although it was one of Head's stronger tools and got removed now, it kind of forces 2 more cards out of Freddie's hand, leaving him with a really awkward hand here. And I think it was the correct play at this point. Also playing perfectly around phony war with that play, because I think would have denied Freddie from just playing it. It would have been too much damage. So I think it was the correct play, and now we can just afford a lot of pressure with this T-34s. And Freddie, this Banzai, completely useless against those 5 attack tanks.
And by this point, Head knows there is no phony war in hand. And he likely knows there's no Kika in hand even, because Kika attack face is probably better than naval operation pass in that situation, because at least Kika would get a trade into it. I'm surprised Head doesn't just do T-34 attack face, set up lethal. He could be afraid of to the last man. Maybe he feels like Freddie's trying to bait him into something, but by this point, he should be pretty confident that there's not a bait happening. He doesn't need to play the T-34 anymore, since this is just lethal on board. Freddie is forced to react to this.
Wait, what?
I think the idea behind the Scorched Earth is it stops defend in depth.
Defend in depth, yeah.
Able to kill the T-34, and he's going to have the credits to just attack with both of these next turn anyways. He can't attack with the one in his hand as well as the one on the board because of the Scorched Earth, which means that this is actually not lethal anymore because of the Scorched Earth.
Yeah, it made sense at this point. Now it's just biting him in the ass here, not having lethal by 1 credit. But still, Freddie is in a really tough spot here. He needs a top deck phony war. I think there's nothing else he can find here that makes him survive the next turn.
Yeah, he needs healing before anything else, because there's no guards in the deck, which this T-34 will just kill him next turn without healing, even if he's able to all the other, which he just can't. And whether it's with the Petliakov Winter Warfare or T-34 blitz up, Head is going to take this game and make the comeback to take it over Freddie 2-1 and move on into the finals to fight Tiger.
Oh, Freddie even surrendering, although there was not guaranteed lethal. He did not know there was a Winter Warfare in hand.
He has the intel on the T-34.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that was the T-34.
The T-60. Yeah.
So there you have it. You got Head going to the finals to take on Tiger. J King, you talked a lot about playing around phony war and things like that. Do you think maybe the series did come down to experience a little bit, having Freddie maybe not been in the tournament scene quite as much, not played those types of open deckless matchups?
I mean, I think there is a lot to be said about Freddie's experience, especially coming into game 2, where I think maybe he could have gone for sharper lines. But to be completely honest, in that 3rd game in the against Head's Soviet France, there was just nothing Freddie could have really done differently that would have had a huge impact on that game. He just unfortunately did not find any phony wars. The only heal he got was Call to the Colonies, which he had to play for draw. And yeah, just a very unfortunate ordering of his deck, and maybe he could have survived a turn or 2 longer here or there, but I mean, Had played well, put on a constant pressure onto Freddie, and Freddie just did not find really the draws to bail himself out of that situation.
Yeah, so maybe I misspoke a little bit. I mean, Spooz, maybe it was less about Freddie's inexperience and more about Head's experience and playing just really. Again, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that last game was played really well on Head's behalf around, knowing when to push and knowing when to control the game.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, as J King already mentioned, there was not much that Freddie could have done differently with his hand, not finding the phony war. And yeah, had just too experience. He knew when he had to play the KV1, how to force out more removal. Then he can go in with the T-34s and leaving Freddie with no answers to them. So yeah, very well played by Head. He absolutely knew how to approach this matchup, and very deserved second finalist here.
And maybe that's the ironic part. Head did a phenomenal job of playing around cards that Freddie just didn't have in hand. So, still played smart. Turns out he didn't exactly need to. Nonetheless, absolutely 100% deserves the spot in the finals. So let's bring up that bracket one more time here as we wrap up day 2 of the Officer Club Clash. We have our semifinals have been completed. See Tiger defeating Berto 2-1. We see Head defeating Freddie 2-1. Some tight fought matches here. We are going to show you Berto versus Freddie tomorrow, as well as Tiger versus Head. The winner of this clash going on to try and grab those 25 points in an effort to qualify for the Officers Club Championship Ultimate that we're going to be having in just a few months. So thank you so much for tuning in as we wrap this semifinals up, and we will see you tomorrow for the third place and the finals of the February OCC.